Hello, I'm Andrew Gentile,
And I'm Arianna.
and you're listening to Behind the Flicks. This show is all about me sharing as many facts as I know about filmmaking and directors and behind the scenes info about movies and whatnot to Arianna. And you'll join us for the ride. Okay, so let me give it just a brief introduction for today's guest. I am thrilled to have her on today's episode. She is the co-writer and star of my latest short film, Unnatural Beast, which can be found on Independent Creative Studios' YouTube channel, and one of the most talented and lovely people I've ever met. Frankly, I mean no offense to all my other actors I worked with, including Arianna.
Including Arianna. Thanks for adding that.
But I'm gonna say, in terms of commitment to performance and the range of the performance, I think Lizzie gave the best performance I've been given the pleasure of having on one of my films thus far. So please, let's introduce Elizabeth Whitfield. Lizzie, how are you?
I am so good. I am admittedly a little bit nervous for those listening at home. This is my first time being on a podcast. And so I'm like, dead space, gotta say words. Oh my gosh. But hey, you gotta face your fears. We're talking about horror movies. Here we fucking go. And Andrew, what a introduction. Very sweet. Thank you. I had so much fun making that movie. I was on my knees in the dirt so much, and that's how you know you had a good time. So.
Yes. I asked a lot of you, and you committed and you met the challenge, and I encourage anybody who wants to cast her in a film to reach out to her or work with her in any capacity. By the way, can I just add before we get started? I'm editing these episodes to remove the ums and ahs. Like, so if you really paid, if the listeners really pay attention to this episodes, it's edited like crazy. Like Arianna has talked about, like, let's do a live episode for the 25th episode, and I'm like, no. I'll be like,
you're so afraid of ums and ahs. Oh my gosh, beware the and the ah.
That was the greatest response could have asked for. I'm with her on this one. I enjoy the flow. When we're just sitting here, I love it.
You see, I craft things, I have to make sure it's all, yes, exactly. Lizzie's got it.
Yeah, but, once every year, every 25 episodes.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so just real quick, I want to get it out of the way. Speaking of horror, right before I hopped on this call, literally 10 minutes before, I get a call from my grandpa Dougie on my mom's side, and he never calls me, basically. We don't, talk very often. And I live right across the street from my sister Sarah. So he goes, "Hey, I need you to go to your sister's apartment right now and tell her to call me." And I'm like, "Okay, what's going on?" And he kind of dances around it a little bit, but he's like, "I want you to stay on the phone and walk to her apartment and even give her your phone." Like, he's just like, "I need to talk to her right fucking now." So it turns out, I don't know if you guys have been seeing stories about this on the internet, but scammers are now using AI to fake an emergency call from a family member to another family member to scam them. So what happened is that a voice that sounded exactly like my sister Sarah called my grandpa and said that she was in jail and she needed to be paid bail, and he paid over $9,000 to bail her out. And he was calling to kind of confirm his suspicion that he was just scammed and to make sure she wasn't in jail and that wasn't happening. So that happened to me 10 minutes before I came on this call.
That's wild.
That's crazy.
Dude. What the fuck? So we all need code words for our family. Like, if there's an emergency, pineapple. Like, that's how you know the shit is serious or whatever.
Yeah, except now you can never use pineapple because, they're always listening, which is why they can get your voice. And AI.
Oh, shit. Fuck. Well, no. Then you have to come up with the safe word in person with your people. Exactly. Like, not over the phone, not over message, fucking in person, if you can. I mean, Jesus.
And then go on airplane mode while the iPhone or whatever your phone is near you.
To be honest, I am not convinced that our phones are constantly listening just because I've watched a couple videos that like deep dive into why it can seem that way. It's more of like they're tracking all of our data on the phone. And if you're in the midst of somebody and they Googled something, da 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 da, kind of triangulates and starts showing you shit that it thinks you would have talked about. Anyway, I'm not fully convinced, but at the same time, who fucking knows? Okay.
Yeah.
Who fucking knows?
Yeah. Even if they don't listen all the time, I think they listen enough to creep me out.
Yes, I would say that is legit.
This is true.
Yeah.
So that happened, and I'm very sorry that happened to you.
I know, my poor grandpa. I really feel for him. You know, that sucks a lot. And it was weird too, because usually when you read about shit like that on the internet, it doesn't, doesn't often happen to you. So right in my own goddamn backyard. So I guess it's a real ass thing. Now we know. PSA, everybody listening. Pineapple.
Well, I'm glad that it wasn't anything major, at least, and that
I know.
You know, for some random reason, you got to talk to your grandpa for 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, definitely. Not the context I would have wanted, but that's okay. It's hilarious because right before that, my fucking cousin David, who never calls me, called, and I was just like, hello, hello, hello. Like, you guys, I'm on a podcast. I can't do this right now. That always happens in life when you're busy. Everybody and their mother needs something when you're busy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic excuse for being, a minute or two late over I don't know where my microphone is. Line.
I win. Yes.
Yeah. But, to piggyback on you winning and everything Andrew said about how wonderful you were in the movie, I just want to say I completely agree with that. Luckily, unluckily, I haven't been there to see all of Andrew's projects start to finish, but I've seen in the past few years and all of the people that were in those movies. And I agree. You were just absolutely fantastic. You were so professional and fun, and you could just put up with everything that happened and, deliver. And it was great to work with you. I'm really glad we got to do that.
Good. So friggin' sweet. Y'all are just boosting me right up. I feel like sunshine, so fucking sweet.
Yeah.
And
let's just bring the rain down with the Blair Witch Project.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Fuck. Blair Witch Project.
All right. Now we move on to the next part.
Okay.
Arianna, can we get a review of this episode's film?
Oh, this episode's film. It's fresh in my brain because I just finished watching it about an hour ago. And it was the only other time I've watched it since the first time I watched it, which was probably preteens. I was a 93 baby, and so I probably watched it by my preteen area because it had definitely been out before that. And I remember questioning whether or not it was real and having to do my research and ask other people. And watching it the second time, obviously knowing, that it's a movie, it still is a really wild ride and a very intense film for a documentary style, quote unquote, podcast people type of film. It's basically about these 3 student filmmakers that decide to pack up all their stuff and go into a seemingly haunted wood that could or could not potentially actually, the film tells you right away, they definitely disappear in these woods. But they're studying a legend called the Blair Witch Project, or the Blair Witch, that apparently killed kid or inspired a man to kill kids potentially. It's pretty choppy about what the legend is and exactly what it represents. You get the little piece of information, your brain goes wild the whole time, and then crazy stuff starts to happen very, very fast. And it doesn't stop until really the end of the movie. And I really loved it. I would give this one I would give it a solid A, just because of the ride it takes you on. You're really invested the whole time. And I love that it's visually it's very horror-like, but the feeling of it is almost actiony. Like you get excitement and suspense and then exposure, and it's just a wild ride the whole time. So I really love the way that the filmmakers chose to do that and how real it really felt. I would not want to watch this movie in a VR headset. Never in a million years would I do that.
Jesus Christ.
It would be terrifying.
Yeah.
This is true.
Abso-fucking-lutely. Totally. Yeah. No. I would agree. Also, are we allowed to do spoilers about this film?
This movie came out in 1999, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was released in 99. So okay, it's fair game to those. If you haven't seen Blair Witch Project, maybe just go and watch it and then come back because it's really worth it to not know what the fuck happens. But yeah, I remember the first time I watched the movie, and I can only imagine what it was like for people who thought it was real. And of course, we'll get into that because my God, the production and distribution of this film is just so unique. But it comes off so real feeling. You know what I mean? I've seen so many found footage movies since because, admittedly, found footage horror is one of my top favorite horror genres, which, when you say that in a room full of film buffs, you get very mixed reactions because some people think found footage is super fun and some people think it is super boring and cheesy and overdone, and both sides have very valid points. But just with everything I've seen since then, this was such a legit jumping off point for found footage. And I think that this film is why that genre has become so saturated, because you got to see how, a very low budget, bare bones production can produce something that is so immersive. There's so much wiggle room in that, and it was just completely like a trailblazer. Ha 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 ha, trailblazer, because they're in the woods. But if only they had stayed on a trail. They did not. They did not.
I laughed way too hard at that. That was great.
But yeah, no, and something too that stands out to me about the film is how exciting that even just the beginning is, when they're kind of basically, it starts out with the three filmmakers. They're shooting a documentary, right, about the Blair Witch legend in this town in Maryland, and they're going around and interviewing, the folk who live in the town about the legend. And it's just lovely because these people give amazing performances. You could totally believe that this is absolutely real because they just seem like that older woman that you met next door to your grandma. And it is so mixed legend. Either she's covered in fur, or she's a hand coming out of a river, or it's just such a multifaceted legend. And again, I am so excited to get into the production because, my God, I have so much to say. And if you let me, I will go and go and go. So feel free to hop in at any point because
I won't lie. Watching this movie, it's probably the first movie of the ones we've covered on the podcast so far that I feel like outlandishly excited to see the behind the flicks facts about this movie. I can't wait to see where it came from and how it produced and how well it did, and all the research I haven't done. I'm so glad hopefully he's here.
Yes.
Yeah, I honestly, I have prepared some facts. That's my usual job as the faux historian on this show. Maybe I'll say some facts, and then Lizzie, I'll let you can just jump in whenever, or whoever can jump in whenever.
I am fair, and just real quick before we get started, from what I'm about to say about the film, I just want to give some sources. I have a article titled 17 Found Facts About the Blair Witch Project on Mental Floss, an article on The Guardian called How We Made the Blair Witch Project. Box office amounts that I'll name are literally on a website called The Numbers, of course, Blair Witch Wikipedia, and the Blair Witch Project FAQ on tripod.com. Just want to put those out there. Okay, there were sources.
Thank you so much for doing that. I can't believe I never really thought about doing something like that on the show. And it's pretty cool that if people want the deeper dive and read it for themselves, you just tell them.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, yeah, man, I feel like I didn't do my job. I wrote I wrote like a page and a half of notes, but that's about it.
I mean,
Lizzie,
same.
well, but Lizzie, remind me, you wrote about this in college, you said.
So yeah, I took, and of course, for those who don't know, Andrew and I met in film school in De Anza Community College, California. I took a production class, and we were assigned to break down the whole production process of a film. And I chose the Blair Witch Project and did a whole presentation, and it's still saved on my fucking Google Drive. So that's a big reason why I chose this film, is because I know a lot about it, and it is so unique in its production. So unique. So feel free to get started, Andrew, and I will gladly jump in.
Okay. Um, so, but first, before we even get into the facts, I want to know, what is it about this film, Lizzie, that you love or like
Ah,
or don't like? What do you like about it?
what do I love about this film? Um, first thing that comes to mind, like I said, is the authenticity of the performances. And there
Yeah.
is a very understandable sort of story behind why that is true. Um, I love the ingenuity, right? Because again, they were operating with such a small budget, really bare bones, and yet they were able to really, a big part of the ingenuity of the film is that lots of things you don't see. It's talked about, maybe you hear it, right? The like atmosphere, the scary atmosphere is created. It's so simple in what makes it scary, because just the bare thought of being lost in the woods, right? Not knowing where you are is already bare minimum terrifying. And then you throw in this idea that there is a witch who is tormenting you, and that there's some supernatural power keeping you lost, the hopelessness in that, that there is nothing you can do to get out of your current situation, and the thought that you put yourself there, right? That's something that's so scary and unsettling. And then, of course, also the power of the imagery of the final sequence when you see um, Michael's character standing in the corner, and it is a perfect recreation of one of the myths about the Blair Witch that's talked about in the beginning, where she would, kill children. She'd have them all in a room, and she'd have, one of them stand in the corner while she killed the other, and you just hear, Heather's screams. Her screams are so believable and blood curdling, and him standing in the corner. I think anybody who has seen Blair Witch Project can picture that frame in their mind right now. It hits so hard. And again, it's so bare bones. Like, how much do you have to do to shoot something like that? Right. But still, it just really resonates. So I love how they took such simple, imagery and tools and created something that you fill in the spaces. They really trust their audience to create in their mind what scares them the most. And I really appreciate that about this film.
Would it be fair to say that I can, now that you mentioned, I can kind of see similarities between Blair Witch and one of your own projects, right? The horror film you made.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Even if it's
They're definitely,
subconscious.
I could believe that. I could believe that. I think, um, for I mean, okay, I am unfortunately highly critical of my first horror film that I made, though it is a great project. I definitely think now that maybe some things were a little on the nose. I may have taken more advice from Max, my DP, about how soon to show the creatures and everything like that. There were all these kinds of little details, but definitely, I wanted to create that atmosphere. I feel like the just the tone and the feeling that you get watching a horror film is so important. You have to be in it and believing the world. And Blair Witch Project certainly fucking does that. I'd hope that I did that to the best of my ability for my first film, but I'm excited for a future to, go from what I learned and make better and better shit, That's how it goes with making movies. You just make them and make them and make them, and then after a while you're like, "Okay, we got this."
Yeah.
Absolutely. By the way, hi Max. He's a regular guest on this podcast. So hopefully, okay. Okay.
Oh, Max. Ah, I miss him, our sweet baby.
Now let's dive into the facts. And anybody feel free to jump in. While at the University of Central Florida, film students Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez realized that they found documentaries on the paranormal scarier than horror films, like narrative horror films. This realization gave them the idea to write a 35-page script for a mockumentary horror feature film, The Blair Witch Project. Am I getting this right?
That's right. That's right. You're totally getting it right. And of course, basically it was just a general sort of outline for what was going to happen in the movie. But all of the dialogue when they're in the woods or talking to each other is fully improvised, which again kind of lends itself to how realistic it feels. But yes, go on, go on.
The reason for the relatively short script was so, as you said, the actors could improvise and create a sense of realism for the film. After placing a casting advertisement, Myrick, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, Myrick and Sanchez whittled down their choices from over 2,000 actors with strong improvisational skills. So that...
How many other actors did you say?
2,000.
I know that they casted Joshua's character, both because he was good at improvising, but also because he understood how to operate a camera, right? Because he really is the one that is actually filming while they're going through the woods and doing all that shit. He's the one. So that was a big part of why they casted him. And it's funny to think of like what their expectations must have been for the film and how far it was going to go. These three actors and the entire cast and crew could have never known what this movie was going to mean for the film industry and the entire horror genre going forward. Maybe they had dreams and hopes, but it's so interesting to think that these three people that they casted must have just been like, okay, like this is interesting. Let's give this a try.
Yeah.
This is pretty loosey motherfucking goosey. We're just saying off the cuff shit, but here we are. I mean, it's so funny how things happen that way.
It really created a different atmosphere for the film than the horror films of yesteryear. During the filming of the Blair Witch Project, the filmmakers had the actors look for messages in film cans that are placed in the woods of Montgomery County in Maryland. Those messages, which were found by the actors using GPS, would tell the actors where the next filming location would be.
Ooh.
So basically it was like it's ridiculous. But there's one more fact I'm going to give before we talk about what I want to talk about with Lizzie.
Okay.
The lengths that the filmmakers would go for realism was so extreme that they deprived their actors of food at night, just as the characters do within the film. I'm just going to say it. Pardon my French. That's bullshit.
How, unfortunately, these actors were treated like shit during the production of this, and they were really treated like shit during the production and even after the film was, distributed. And so from what I understand, they had this GPS, they were thrown into the woods, they'd find, milk crates, like you said, with director notes.
I thought it was film canisters. Am I wrong?
Yes, yeah, film canisters, excuse me. One of the director's notes is, Heather, you're absolutely sure that to get out of this mess, you go south. Don't take no for an answer. Or another note, Josh, somewhere along the way today, you've had it with this bullshit. And of course, they weren't allowed to share these directing notes with each other. It was supposed to be, this is for you. This is going to, sort of inform your performance and how you react to things. And then, as the days went on, each crate had less and less food, right? Because this was also where they'd get the supplies. Because, the two directors wanted them to be hungry and tired and irritable. And the three actors do say that they became just very, very actually irritated with each other. They were fucking miserable. They were in the woods, fucking hungry. And so a lot of the, friction and animosity that you feel in the film is absolutely real. They were fucking fed up with each other, right? And that, I mean, that's not ethical, right? I think that maybe it could have been different if the three actors were told beforehand that this was the intention, because I know that actors will oftentimes go to strange lengths to get a performance. So if they had been like, hey, this is what you're kind of signing up for. We want you to be a little bit miserable because that'll inform your, performance. I would get that, but I do not believe that was told to them because they just wanted, that full authentic frustration. And then of course, all the shit that you hear at night, like them shaking the tent and stuff like that. Basically, the two directors was just like, all right, y'all, like go to sleep at night. If you hear some shit, wake up, turn on the camera, start acting. And I can only imagine like being in their position and, working 24/7, being hungry and tired, and then you get woken up in the middle of the fucking night. It's like not only are you having to be like on call to act at any moment, but probably they also liked that they knew that it would make the three actors more exhausted to be awoken in the middle of the night. Like it just gets deeper and deeper. These poor babies. And it's so strange to think, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
as much as I find it interesting, it's sad and a little bit disturbing. It's almost like it's this meta horror about the film because they're not just acting, they were having a fucking terrible time.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, you're right. Like, as somebody that really likes the film, that is bad news. Because it makes it harder to watch it, realizing that it's so good because they were so miserable. And to hear that they're mistreated afterwards as well.
So yeah, so
Like when it
probably
finished, what the heck happened?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I need more story.
If I can interject my opinion for a second,
Sure,
I just want to say, actors who work with me, I'll feed you. I'll give myself that.
God.
I'll give myself that. I'm a cruel man, but not that cruel.
I know they're always talking about like craft services on sets, snack table as far as the eye can see. Not for the Blair Witch, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
And look how iconic that was.
The 20 hours of raw footage that was shot for the film was cut down to the final 81-minute runtime. After screening the film in smaller film festivals for feedback, the Blair Witch Project was then submitted into Sundance Film Festival. The film was a surprise hit and was bought by Artisan Pictures for $1.1 million. In its nationwide release in America, the Blair Witch Project was the highest grossing film of its opening weekend. And how much did the film end up costing, Lizzie? I've heard contradictory reports on this.
How much did it cost to make?
The final, like, post-production.
So when I was doing my research, I found a lot of different numbers.
Same.
I kind of landed on about 60,000, right?
To make?
No. Yeah, to make. The production,
Wow.
around 60,000, which, if you know anything about film production, that is fucking nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And
even
then,
in
of
1999,
course,
that's nothing.
Yep. And with US release and everything outside of that, it made basically 248 million overall, all things considered. It was second place in the US box office to, a little film called The Sixth Sense. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But yeah, it was right up behind that at the time. Yeah, no, you may have seen it. But it came in second place. And, what's so sad, unfortunately, I've talked about the mistreatment of these actors, is that, again, how much they were paid for the job, the number moves around, but it was like, 1,000 in the thousands for a film that ended up grossing, hundreds of millions of dollars. But what's interesting is that they did end up getting a payout, but in kind of a roundabout way. They unfortunately made a second Blair Witch, not the 2016 remake, but a Blair Witch 2. It's garbage. It's worth a cringe watch, but it's garbage. And, they use the likenesses of these actors in that film, and the three actors were able to sue for their likenesses being used without their permission, and they each received an individual pay at about $4 million. So they did end up getting some, money from the Blair Witch world, but the fact that they were treated like shit, and then the film did super well, and they just weren't paid for their time. It seems like these two fucking directors, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, directors, producers, were maybe pieces of shit, of course. And just for the record, the three actors were Heather Donahue, Joshua Leonard, and Michael C. Williams. They use their actual names in the film, which I think is interesting. But yeah, so they end up getting a payout. But yeah, it's a big mess. And Andrew, would you like to tell them a little bit about how they kind of made some, exactly, the marketing is ridiculous. Enlighten us.
One reason for the Blair Witch Project's success was due to its marketing campaign, which made use of the early days of the internet to create a viral sensation. The advertising of the Blair Witch Project claimed that the film was an actual documentary. The marketing was so convincing that in the first year after the film was available, the Internet Movie Database, or IMDb for the kids these days, claimed that the actors of the film were, quote, missing, presumed dead. The actors in actuality are alive.
They are alive. They are not dead. And dude, the detail that they went into to make this seem real. So they literally made a 44-minute fake documentary called Sticks and Stones, an exploration of the Blair Witch legend. And in it, there is fully believable fabricated news stories talking about the disappearance of the three, quote unquote, disappearance of the three students. There is articles, interviews with people about it. They show like footage from inside, the FBI investigation, the tapes themselves, and all the evidence that they have. And, I was actually watching it before we came on, and it's so funny because it starts and then there is the, opening text on screen, and it reads, in October 1994, 3 student filmmakers disappeared in the woods near Burkittsville, Maryland, while shooting a documentary. A year later, their footage was found. And I loved seeing that because that was the beginning of an era. If you watch found footage horror, that is almost always right at the top. Some sort of text that is like, such and such happened, such and such bitches went missing, here's the footage. Just that little detail was such a thing. And I tell you what, so in it, they're doing these, fake interviews with people in the town who knew them, who went missing. And this one older woman in her house, she goes, I don't believe in ghosts or vampires or communists. So there's that little nugget.
One of these things is not like the other.
Yeah, one of these things is not fucking like the other. And then so they did that, and they used a short snippet of that fake documentary to entice investors. And then at some point, the investors ran with it and even did a fake investigative TV show episode that aired on cable TV investigating the disappearance of these 3 students. And then at the fucking film festivals, they would hand out missing persons flyers asking people to come forward with information. So it's ridiculous to think that people were going to the theater thinking that this is real. Like, when I think about the film, if I thought this was real, I would be fucked. I would not be able to sleep. Yeah. And I'm sure there were millions of people across the US who were unable to sleep and didn't go into the woods for a very long time after watching this movie.
It's kind of like the, I'm going to totally date myself here. This is going to be like the Orson Welles War of the Worlds radio broadcast. Anybody get that at all? No. Okay, so essentially, Orson Welles, he started out as a radio broadcaster, like a radio voice, and he did this for Halloween. He recreated H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds book, except he did it as like a real news program because there's no television back in the 30s. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got.
Oh, so it was almost like if there was a real emergency and there was a radio broadcast keeping people posted on the current alien invasion going on in the world. That is sick as fuck.
And a lot of people, a lot of people thought it was real.
Oh,
like, oh, New Jersey's been taken, that kind of thing.
Oh,
it's so
what a brilliant thing to do for Halloween.
Yeah.
Way to go,
I
Orson.
know. Why are we fucking terrorizing people, the very people that we are also trying to entertain? You know what I mean? It's like legit terrorizing for entertainment. What a phenomenon. My God.
Yeah.
I guess that's just what we're looking for in horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Fuck us up. You know what I mean? Like, if the horror is good, I don't want to ever sleep again. I want to be, like, physically fucked by this shit. But yeah, man, like, this film, not only do I love it as a film, but what a fucking intense way that they did this. My Uncle Zach, he was one of the first people who told me before I knew any of this that when the Blair Witch came out, he believed it was real. And I'm kind of fucking envious. I have never in my life gotten to watch a scary movie thinking, you know what? Actually, scratch that. Y'all seen The Fourth Kind?
Yes.
The what?
Yeah.
Oh no! Oh no!
I definitely had to look that one up afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So The Fourth Kind, I don't fucking know what year it came out.
I've seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yes. So, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The Fourth Kind came out in 2009, has Mila fucking Jovovich, and it was also sort of presented as basically real documentary footage interspliced with a recreation of what happened with like actors. And it is, footage of people seemingly being like contacted by aliens, taken from their homes, possessed by aliens. Andrew, if you have not seen this, you have to see this. Because when I watched this as a middle schooler, I fucking thought it was real. I was fully convinced it was real. So honestly, I take that back. Like the tradition of convincing people that some, horror movie is based on some real shit hath not ended. They are not done with us yet.
You see, I'm so dumb. When I thought I thought Jaws was real. I was like 12, and I went. And that was the first time I was in Mexico by the coast. I mean, the only time I was in Mexico was watching Jaws with my cousins.
That's when you watched Jaws when you were on the Mexican coast.
Yes.
What a time to be watching that movie.
Why?
I mean, that definitely would make it easier to be believable.
Yeah.
Oh, God, Honey Bear. Wait, how old were you at that point? Remind?
Too old to be scared. 11, 12.
Oh, that's about the time that I watched The Fourth Kind. We were on different points of the planet getting scared shitless by different films at that time. So no shame. Absolutely no shame. Okay.
Got it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, boss. By the way, can I? This is totally random and has nothing to do with the overall point, but in terms of the marketing of the film, a 40-second teaser for the Blair Witch Project was shown before The Phantom Menace in theaters.
Oh, jeez.
I just want to say that would not happen these days. I don't think, because like a indie like a $60,000 film with one of the highest, I don't think it would happen. Anyway, what do you guys think?
Yeah, no, that's
really totally random.
Interesting. But I think maybe why is because, again, I would need to do a little bit more research, but I'm pretty sure once, investors saw the film and the way that they were marketing it at music festivals, they, invested a lot of money into the marketing. And so it maybe was at that point that it kind of earned its spot before the Phantom Menace, because it was just taking the US by storm, people believing it's real, so much buzz going on, but it is still fantastic that they were able to go from their, oh my God, I forgot to even fucking mention.
Yes.
So
more juicy details.
Yeah, no. So in pre-production, to prepare for shooting, 10 to 15 members of the crew camped out at one of the director/producer's houses in Maryland, Eduardo Sanchez's house, for 6 weeks, sleeping on couches, sleeping on the floor, basically a big, horrible, probably stinky slumber party to, prepare for this film. So to think of all of them crammed in that house, sleeping on the couch, and then, 8 days of the actors and the directors and a couple crew members working 24 hours around the clock, fucking 20 hours of just all this shit, right? And it fucking panned out. Phantom Menace, bitch. Like, we made it. We made it. You know what I mean?
How long did it actually shoot for?
Like the production?
Yeah, how long were the 3 actors out there shooting?
8 days.
A full 8 days.
8 fucking days. Okay? 8 days on a fun camping trip. You get home and become your bed. You know what I mean?
So thank goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I have never been camping. I thought about it when I was a kid, and I'm so glad my parents didn't let me do that. The Blair Witch Project. Let's talk about the influence the Blair Witch Project has had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is popularized. I wouldn't say originated, but it's definitely popularized a subgenre of horror to mainstream audiences, the horror mockumentary. Now there have been other horror mockumentaries. Cannibal Holocaust is one. I think that's from the 70s. And I don't know the exact year, but that's the 70s, 80s. But
Mockumentary.
It's a mockumentary. It's kind of not real. It's very controversial. That's one of the first. But here's actually a fact that ties back to the Blair Witch Project. Horror mockumentaries have existed for almost as long as films have been around. One need no look further for proof of this than the 1922 film Haxan, Witchcraft Through the Ages. Haxan Films, the production company Myrick and Sanchez co-founded to make the Blair Witch Project, was named after that silent film.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. Though I'm going to be kind of an asshole.
Everybody
look out. Giant asshole coming through.
Go for it.
Are we sure that Cannibal Holocaust or Blair Witch Project fall under mockumentary specifically? Because I looked up the documentary. I looked up the definition, and it says a motion picture or television program that takes the form of a series documentary in order to satirize its subject, right? Because I feel like, you know what I mean? I don't believe that Cannibal Holocaust or Blair Witch Project are meant to be satire. They're just fictional documentaries, fictional movies in a documentary style. I've always seen these films as being under the category of found footage horror, rather, because like mockumentary is like documentary now, with like Bill Hader, like literally satire about documentaries, you know.
I just lost a bet, and I owe a lot of money to that guy. And I'm leaving this in. Thank you for correcting me. The facts need. Sorry, take two. Thank you for correcting me. The facts need to be put out there.
Yeah.
So hats off to you.
All good. If I'm gonna correct somebody about anything, it's gonna be found footage, bitches, because this is my shit. Okay.
Yes. So I'm just gonna say, and speaking of the influence, because of the rugged DIY digital nature of the Blair Witch Project, not including the film parts, but it was shot on like early digital cameras. Am I right on that, Lizzie?
I believe so. Yeah,
High
I do
8.
believe so. Mm-hmm.
Because of the rugged DIY digital nature of the Blair Witch Project, other filmmakers after the film's release were clearly inspired to create their own horror found footage films. One need no look further than the Paranormal Activity series, Cloverfield, and Chronicle.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you may think of the film, the Blair Witch Project's legacy persists.
Yeah.
It fucking does. And I
Yeah.
love all three of those movies that you just named. I saw
Yeah.
many of them in theaters when they came out. If anybody has vertigo, if you're very sensitive to vertigo, found footage is probably not for you. I know my
Yeah.
Nana tried to see Cloverfield in theaters and she had to leave because, the camera's moving so much. And
Yeah.
but yeah, and I tell you what, I went through a phase when I was like 19 years old of digging up as many found footage movies as I possibly could. Because what's so interesting about it is you can go on like HBO, Amazon Prime, whatever, and there are very obviously just student films
Yeah.
streaming on these fancy ass, billion-dollar networks or whatever. And so it's just so interesting how found footage really has given this sort of avenue for, the amateur filmmaker to break into distribution and really, get your hands dirty with making movies, which is something that's really close to my heart. A found footage movie series that has a bunch of installments and is so fucking good if you're into this is VHS. They've made like 6 now. They're amazing. I'm obsessed with them. And basically, what they are is the idea is that it is a, compilation of a bunch of haunted, VHS tapes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different directors and their different found footage horror movies kind of, edited all together in this mosaic of found footage. So it keeps fresh constantly. There's always something new happening, from through a different eye, different style, and it's creepy as fuck. So check out VHS. The newest one, I believe VHS 84 or something is coming out. They're not done yet. And so, yeah, I'm a little bit of a nerd about found footage movies, admittedly.
I love that you're talking about how it could be an entryway for a beginning filmmaker because
Yes.
I mean we all have our dreams and our dream scripts, and most of them are way too expensive and way too much manpower for somebody who's just starting out to make happen. And so they just kind of sit on a shelf. And so if you're doing something like found footage, you can make a very interesting, very unique film that is very affordable. I mean, like we said, $60,000 is nothing. I mean, you can get that saving up for a year between 4 people, 5 people, and you can make a movie without needing anything from anybody. And that's amazing that you can put that out there. And then the fact that these streaming platforms are allowing people to step on for, I don't know what for, I'm assuming some kind of fee or whatever. It's amazing. It's a great way to get your stuff out there and to officialize what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Though, what's funny is there definitely is some very low quality found footage horror out there and ready to be streamed. I think that, it's a challenge to do what, the Blair Witch Project did, because obviously movies like the ones, Andrew, you just mentioned, like Cloverfield, Paranormal Activity actually was another one that I believe was pretty low budget. I think it was probably more than 60,000, but it was pretty low budget. But like, yeah, it takes a lot of ingenuity and creativity to use, those limited resources and really create a product that is fully scary, especially now that and I think that's something as artists that we deal with a lot is, keeping our stories fresh, keeping the way that we, tell them visually fresh. But at this point, I also just really love the collaboration of time. How, as people do things in new ways, all the art after it is just kind of like a mutant child of all the things prior. It's like we're constantly building on what we've already done, and it's like we're collaborating with artists all the time that we've never even met. I love being inspired by these kinds of things. It's fantastic.
It's exhilarating and exciting to find something that's feels alive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Totally. Yeah. And I also forgot to mention, in the film, they find teeth, right? They find like little, that I believe those are the teeth, like the wisdom teeth pulled from one of the directors, right? And then the hair is Joshua Leonard's hair, one of the three actors. So they really put their, hair, teeth, and tears into this film, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Phew. Are there any like random legends about this movie like there is about Poltergeist? Or is it
no.
all just...
I know what you mean, but
Yeah.
I don't think...
I was just curious.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But what's so funny about that question is like it doesn't even need to be haunted because the reality of the production itself is so horrifying. Although I know in the production of Poltergeist, you know what, Andrew? I think you were the one who fucking told me this.
What?
That in the production of Poltergeist, they used real skeletons in the scene in the end when they're in the muddy pool hole or whatever, and how people tend to think that that's kind of unethical. Again, for me, it's all consent. Maybe people can donate their bodies to the film industry. Thus they're bones. But who knows if those people consented to have their skeletons used for Poltergeist? I do not know.
Yeah. I think we should save that for another episode.
I was like,
okay, fair
enough. No. That is an excellent question, Arianna. I don't have the answer to that, to be honest, because I
think you're probably right. It was bad enough. It didn't need an extra curse on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. Closing thoughts, guys.
One thing I don't actually know is how real the Blair Witch legend itself is. Funny enough, in all of my research, I didn't think to just see if there was a Blair Witch legend completely outside of the Blair Witch Project and everything that they fabricated for it, right? It could very well be that there was that legend and they just kind of took that folklore, myth, whatever, and rolled with it. I don't actually know, but I would be interested to know.
Be hard to trust anything you find, though, huh?
Exactly. At this point, jeez.
I'm sure. Look, I'm sure you read the same Wikipedia article I did, Lizzie.
Yes, I did.
That, by the way, guys, listeners of this podcast, I look at Wikipedia for some of these sources. Sorry to ruin the magic. So, yeah, no, they certainly... I know the filmmakers claimed they took some legends from here and there and kind of amalgamated together, if that's a word, amalgamated.
Oh, okay.
But,
okay. Yeah.
As to whether or not it was the Blair Witch, this specific legend, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I could believe that they just kind of, took from other legends, but wanted to create their own. And you know what? Now that I think about it, they maybe had to do that because even though it was early in the days of the internet, and so it was a very particular niche time that you could pull this off, if they had just taken a legend that already existed and gone off of it, maybe that could have outed them a little bit if somebody did some digging, right? The fact that they created it themselves really made it seem like this, interesting, real legend that they were, sort of showcasing for the first time. Just such a trip, man. The lengths that they went to. And if you have a chance, you can find the Sticks and Stones and Exploration of the Blair Witch Legend, the fake documentary on YouTube. And it is believable as fuck. The news stories, the FBI footage, the interviews, believable as fuck.
I really want to go see that. That's next on my list maybe not before I go to bed. Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, it's definitely maybe a little bit slow and boring if you know that it isn't real, but it's still a huge trip to like look at it through the eyes of somebody who would have been believing it, right? And then going to see the film. Oh my God, the
It messed with
effect
me,
just fuck.
Back in those days, it would have been something.
Yeah, man.
My last thoughts is because as I was writing it down, I picked my favorite like screenshot that I saw, and then my favorite line that I heard. I want to know your guys's. Mine, there was a shot like right when they wake up the following day, just when stuff starts to get weird, and the camera, it's like waking up into the daytime, and you see Josh like laying down, and you have a freak out moment where we're like, oh my gosh, is he dead? And then it clears up and he smiles. And I thought that was a genius way to freak us out and calm us down, right? Like in the beginning of all the chaos. It's like, oh, I know how this is gonna go with that frame.
Like you have to have the little bit of the high note, like a little bit of the laugh before you really go down to the depths.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's so foreboding, and that's a really good question, Arianna. I love that question. Because I think for me, obviously my favorite visual frame is the final frame with Michael's character standing in the corner. That is so effective. But outside of that, I think my favorite part is some sound that they did because, um, is it Michael's? Joshua's character at some point in the film, goes missing. And then one night, Heather and Michael can hear him, screaming in the distance. And that part has always just landed with me, the idea that you are hearing your friend who is missing ostensibly being tortured in the middle of nowhere, not knowing what the fuck is going on. And then, of course, the next morning they find his teeth, and it just hits you like a ton of bricks that the sound you were hearing was his teeth being forcibly yanked from his skull by a fucking witch, it seems. And then of course, it's just so hard to choose because when Heather gives that performance, right, that classic screen grab that's on the movie itself, where her eyes are just crying, her nose is running, and she is just fully distraught. And for a second, it just hits you right in the fucking heart that they are in a hopeless and terrifying situation. There are so many parts of this film where the reality of what they're going through is so tangible.
Yeah.
God, I love this movie.
Yeah. I mean, one of the words that was coming to mind at the beginning of our podcast was it really, not to be too cliche, but the humanity of it is very, very present. You can't help but relate with what they're going through, and it feels so real, like you said, because it's improvised, and it's intense the whole time. How much you're like, I would be one of those people, most definitely.
Yeah, man.
In my opinion, the most impressive aspect of this movie is the acting. I was like, Heather was she crushed it, right? I mean, yeah, she crushed it. Like what Lizzie's act, yeah, crushed it. Audio listeners will have to switch over the YouTube video to see that. But
yeah,
no, she crushed it.
I made that gesture specifically so they would both listen and watch.
Yes.
Anyway.
No, but yeah, she crushed it, and and the writing is great. I mean, it really shows how much ingenuity can be, how much you can get done with creativity.
No, absolutely. And I think that, in some of the amateur found footage horror that I've seen, there aren't very clear beats and a really clear escalation, right? But in the Blair Witch, the escalation is so well thought out, right?
Yeah.
Because first it's that they are lost, right? And then it is that the map has gone missing. And then it is that we find out one of them threw the map away. So they're getting angrier and angrier and more scared and more lost. And then, Josh goes missing, right? And then they find his teeth. And even before that, they're finding, so it's just so clear how it escalates and escalates and then finally gets to that climax at that house, right? Like it's so cool how they were able to give it that solid structure when they were doing a fully improvised film.
Yes.
Those little pieces were, as much as those two dudes were assholes, they knew what the fuck they were doing. You know what I mean? How many times are artists going to be assholes and then make amazing art? This happens to us all the time. God damn it.
God damn it is right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are talented assholes, and that's the tragedy of it all.
Yeah.
I'm one of them. I'm kidding.
Oh, come on now. Don't say that.
Did you have a favorite line?
Me.
Andrew, writer man, did you have a favorite line?
Did I have writer man? It's kind of a comedic line. It's we know we're alive because we're smoking. We'll know we'll be alive because we're smoking. And I'm like, that's funny on a few levels.
I love that that's your favorite line.
Yeah, that's at least that's the one that sticks out to me at the moment. It's hard for me to remember lines of movies. I just remember the feeling of it. I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I think the reason I'm asking is because I wrote it down while I was watching it.
Yeah.
I thought it was
that's good technique.
It was the are you gonna write us a happy ending when he's filming Heather, and it's Josh, and I might be wrong, but it might be the last line he says in the movie. Because he disappears the next morning.
Wow.
And then she walks away and the camera goes down. He goes, are you going to write us a happy ending?
This is why she's the critic. This is why she's the critic.
This is so good.
Dude, that is so good. And I really do hope that is the last thing he says, because that would have been a really good edit, right? Because they filmed like 20 hours and they would have thought, okay, the last thing he says is happy ending.
Yeah.
And then he's fucking gone. Yeah. Happy, peace out, bro. So that hits. Good shit, Arianna. That shit hits.
Yeah, that's why it was epic when I heard it. It's right at the end, just when shit hits the horrible fan.
Unless there are more closing thoughts. Lizzie, where can people follow you? What do you have to promote?
Oh my goodness, that is such a good question. You can honestly right now, basically my Instagram. I'm at Lizzie Dancing Again. Lizzie spelled Lizzie. And right now, I haven't been making that many narrative films. I'm mostly focused on Super 8 filming. I take just footage that I think is beautiful, avant-garde sort of style, and then overlay my poetry, my dictated poetry over it. And soon I will be releasing a music video, a Super 8 music video that I'm making for my friend Ed. He made this really beautiful acoustic guitar piece. And so I'm waiting for the film to get back. But yeah, if you want to see some of my Super 8 or random shit that I've made, Instagram Lizzie Dancing Again. What up?
Elizabeth Whitfield, thank you so much for joining Behind the Flicks. We really hope you'll come back. I'm thrilled to have you on. You are such a great guest.
Wow. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a treat, podcasting for the first time and getting to see your beautiful faces again and just talk about shit that we love. We live and die by films in here, man. So thank you so much for inviting me and having me. Thank you so much.
Listeners, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to shoot us an email at independentcareerstudios@gmail.com. If you like this episode, please write a review and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or YouTube. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're also now on Spotify. Behind the Flicks was created by myself and Arianna. I and Lizzie researched this episode. I wrote and edited this episode. My name is Aaron Gentile. This has been an Independent Creative Studios production.